You know, they're always talking about how white hats are really hard to keep clean. I don't know, man. This black hat just is just a magnet for crap. Doesn't do any good that I'm working in the shop and it always gets on there, but anyway. Oh, hey, welcome to the McGolf Fitting Room / McGolf Shop. If you would, like, subscribe, swing and hit that bell, and that way you get more of these videos when they drop. If you want to see more of what's going on in the McGolf Shop and the fitting room, take a look and at my social platforms of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Okay? So, did Mizuno just drop a little bit of left-handed love on all us left-handed golfers? Let's find out. So the Mizuno product is dropping. You're seeing a lot of reviews. Those are the guys that got it early. Okay, they got it early. Now, those of us that are actual fitters are getting our product now. Now, what you're going to see is, let's talk about the difference in fittings really quick. Now, you're going to see fitting carts where the club and the head goes together pretty easily, and you have multiple options and all kinds of stuff like that. In shops like mine, where we choose to be heads only account, we're going to use connectors very much like that. Now, connectors very much like this add weight, right? Add weight. So we have to do these, I don't know if everybody else does it. So what I do in order to make up for that weight, I take off some of the hosel and I drill it out in order to get my same bore depth. And then that way, basically, this is the same club head as it was, even if it wasn't on there, okay? So I make it so that it feels, this should be just like it is if I didn't do anything to it. And that way I can use all that stuff, all right, in order to do the very same thing that the people with the fitting carts do. There you go. So a little bit of lefty love. Oh, wow. So they dropped a little bit of left-handed love on us last year with the MP20. All right, and they call it the SEL. It's the Select Lefties or whatever. I call them Special Edition Left-Handed. And this was a lot of people enjoyed this. I tested it. It hit very well. Except for my game, and not very many other folks' game are for that particular head. So after much begging and pleading, please make something a little more forgiving. And they did, but boy, oh boy, they didn't get far out of the box. They came up with the Tour. There we go. The Tour head. Now this is equivalent to the right-handed version of that. All right. There we go. Now the best thing about it is in the 4 and the 5 iron, they actually use the next one up, which is what would be the hot metal forged, which looks a lot like this guy. Now I'm going to go through it because I have a set. So the idea here is the left-handed models and something new that they've never done before is they've included a gap wedge. Now that's amazing, right? I am a big proponent of the gap wedge being part of the set because most guys, the gap wedge is still going to be a full swing club. So why not take all the advantages of the iron in order for it to take a full swing club? And if you're taking half swings or finesse swings, you still get all that benefit as opposed to hitting a wedge, okay? And they'll act accordingly, I think. So I think they really did a good job. Way to go, Mizuno, right? And so what did we do? You know, again, we're going to do this is basic. Now, lefties, this is for you guys, but righties, the right-handed version is virtually identical. So everything I say for the lefties is going to apply for you righties. So it is, you know, it's kind of an SEL review. However, it's also going to be the Tour iron review as well. So stay with me. So as usual, you know, what we do is we go measure them, make sure it's all good, and then we hit them to see what's at, and then we see just exactly whose that's going to be for. So let's go measure. All right, so when I was putting these things together, that I measured the weight, and the weight was dead on. Mizuno's really good about that. And every iron set that I've ever had has been dead solid on the loft, which has been phenomenal. However, in this particular iron that I went to hit, it was off by 2 degrees. I was like, what's with that? And so I adjusted it. We're going to see a difference of two worlds, of what it was and then what happens after you do it. So let's go see that. All right, here we are looking at how the Mizuno Tour left-handed SEL model or select model works. Now, what we're going to show you, this is my first round with it. I had 10 shots. If you look at the black line here, it actually went pretty decent. A little bit to the inside, maybe a small pull fade is basically what it felt like. And pretty tight with one outlier. And not too bad. If we look at it from a different viewpoint, it looks a lot like that. And there's your fade. All right. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there's very, very little offset on this guy. And I have a slight outside in swing, so that's expected. Now, what happened was that the club itself was a little weak, as we show in the measurements. Now, what I did is I bent it forward in order to make it the same as the spec was supposed to be. So now we have the Tour adjusted, and that's what this looks like. So if we watch these guys fly, again, we have some fade, the pull fades, and then we just had some just downright pulls. If you look right over here, we look at it from this side, it's a little cleaner. Have two categories, one that hugs the fairway or the center line, and the other one that's a slight pull. When we look at it from a club perspective point of view, how did it work? Well, right there, swings are fairly tight, not professional by any shape of the imagination, but pretty good. The shaft was working its way. I was still accelerating through the ball, which is what we want. And I was hitting the KBS TGI, which is the Tour graphite iron, in the 95. And there it is, and giving me the same type of performance, just not as tight of a pattern as that guy. And again, you see me on the outside in. So really, how did they compare? That's really the trick here, right? So we have the Mizuno SEL Tour, which was the non-adjusted, and then the one that I made stronger. And if we look, we gained 6 yards in carry and 8 yards in total distance. So about 2/3 of a club when we're talking about that. A little more into the right, like we saw. I was swinging, just a little bit slower, about 0.8 mile an hour. And the ball speed was coming off a little bit hotter by about 2 mile an hour because the smash factor was better. I was just hitting it better. And when I was hitting it better, I didn't get as much spin on it. I was dropped about, 400 or 500 RPM. And that's just well within the tolerance of it, so I'm not going to sweat that one too much. Everything else was as it would be if you had a lower lofted iron, slightly lower in vertical. The descent came out very, very well. In fact, maybe just a little bit better. Had the classification of the fade, which it was. Same kind of flight times. Everything turned out pretty good. So now the real key is, where did they land, right? We saw them fly. Where did they land? Right here. So we look at the blue, and we'll look at that one. There we go. There's the blue. Pretty tight pattern, which is what we've seen in the past from the Tour model, that they tend to, be a fairly decent pattern. However, for me, what it is, not so much right to left as it is north to south. Now we have some up in here because this is easily a 10-yard swing, right? And then they have the one outlier here. If we go to the adjusted model, and we have the same thing, we have a pattern up here and then a pattern down here, but basically in the line. And of course, the adjusted pattern, this was the beginning of it, and this was the end of it, as apparently I was getting tired or not hitting very well, but with a carry of almost 190. So not overall, not too bad. I like the feel of the adjusted model. For some reason, I just sat behind it, and it just looked better to me. The feel was very, very good, as we expect from a Mizuno product, and it got out there. The part that I'm really thinking that people will enjoy is now it has a gap wedge that is just right where it needs to be, and it's part of the set. I think that's going to make this a little bit more attractive to most folks, where they can play an iron that's part of the set instead of a wedge. So let's go see just exactly who they're going to fit. In addition to all what we've been talking about, let's talk a little bit more about how the Mizuno is made. Number one, it's forged in Hiroshima, Japan. and they're, infamous for what's called grain flow forging, which, as I understand it, is that they take a billet and they heat it up to a specific temperature, they mash the initial shape of the club, and then what they do is they reheat it and then get it into its final shape. What that does, it allows the crystalline structure to get packed more tightly, all right? And that's the reason why Mizuno has been, known for their forged clubs for a long, long time. Now they've added in what they call the HD grain flow forged. The HD is just exactly what they mean, but what they're calling it is a stability frame. And whether you use it on something like a tour, I'll get you a right-handed model. Whether you use it on something like a tour model, or if you use it something even like on a hot metal model, what they're talking about is this, all this around here. Okay, all this around here. And that's basically perimeter weighting, all right? That's perimeter weighting, and that makes the club more stable than it would be if it was in a blade. Now, as you can tell, we'll use this as an example. As you can tell, there's a lot of weight out here, all right? And they call it toe bias, so that you don't, because typically the guys that are using the ones closer to the MP line, the tour line, have a tendency to what they call overcooking, meaning they pull, hook, that kind of stuff. So what they do is they throw a little bit more weight out here, right? And that way it kind of stops it. And okay, that's a pretty good idea. And so that's what they're looking for, all right? The last bit is they've really gotten into what they call vibration monitoring. And in the back of what they have their pad, back in the sole area in the pad, they've done a lot of, we'll call it research on vibrations. They call it harmonic impact, and that's because of a thicker cavity pad. Now, I'm not so certain exactly how you get a thicker cavity pad on this, because it's basically a one-piece forged club. However, something like that, certainly, right, where it's got a deeper cavity and whatnot, I could see that. Now, what is harmonic impact? What that means is, what Mizuno's trying to let you know about is that it's going to let you feel your shot longer, all right? Because the ball's only on the club face for just microseconds. And it's ping pong, and off it goes. Well, now you can feel your shot more, all right? That's what that's for, is to feel your shot more. And then finally, finally what they're really been known for is that gray finish, right? It's called a gray or a pearl finish, and that's what they're for. So with all that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about it. So now you saw what we did. We hit them, and the difference was pretty impressive. I only bent the club 2 degrees, and I actually bent it just a tiny bit stronger, what I'm more used to. And I got distances that I was really, really liking. And if you noticed, either I got into a groove, or that made a huge amount of difference in the way that it looks at a dress, which could possibly be that thing. Anyway, I hit it better, right? I gained about half to 2/3 of a club, 7 yards. That's a pretty big deal when you're talking about clearing water, getting over a hump, that kind of thing. And I really, really like the way that KBS shaft felt in it, although the stock shaft in this is going to be the S taper. So I think I'm really going to go and try that as well, as I have some over here, and they're in black, which I think would look really cool in this thing. And we're going to try that out and see whether or not that makes a difference as well. Outside of that, so it has a massively thin top line. For guys that hate thick top lines, you lefties out there, even righties, because the tour model is going to be the same way, it's a butter knife kind of top line. It's not as thin. I don't think it's as thin as maybe the MPs would appear to be. However, it is very thin, very players oriented. What I really like about the sole on this guy is that it is rounded, and there's no real edge on this thing. And again, I'm not an edgy guy, but it has a radius of which you can see. It's got a lot of bounce in it, which I really like. It also has the gap wedge. Man, oh man, have I been waiting on one of those. It has the gap wedge. I am so excited about that one. And it hits well. Now, I hit it, and of course I'm not the expert here, but hopefully you can see it. Most of my patterns are right in here. So I was making face contact. I will tell you though, when you're on, you know it. When you're off, You feel it, but it doesn't feel as penal as maybe the blade does when you're off. And that's the perimeter weighting speaking to you. So you can get away with some off-colored shots and you're all right. Now, what's going to happen? I did hit some off-colored shots or off-centered shots, we'll call them that. You know, my 180 to 190, 190 to 200, whatever it was, it does penalize you just like anything else, but I didn't lose directional missing, it was distance missing. So that might be okay. I have to play with that one a little bit more. But it's, you know, and you're going to lose quite a bit. You're not losing just a little bit like, say, on the more forgiving irons like their hot metal product. So if you're off, you're going to be short, all right? But you won't lose directional, which I think is kind of cool, really. Almost no offset if there is any at all. So certainly this is still a player's club. All right, it's still an above average players club, to be sure. Can you get the ball out there? Yeah. Am I going to be hitting it like I do some of the game improving type irons? Well, no, it's because they're not that strong. All right, they're just not meant to do that. They're meant to give you a consistent performance with a consistent feel, with a guy who wants to work the ball, be able to shape a shot, get the ball up in the air. The thing flies high for me, and I hit a pretty high ball, so it wasn't like I hit just hit penetrators, so it's pretty good. So, okay, lefties and righties out there, this is a club that is certainly for that average to above average striker. They're going to say above average striker. There are some guys that are average ball strikers out there, average golfers out there. Let's go with that. They're average golfers, but they hit the irons very, very well, and maybe your scores are not due to your iron striking. If that's you, then these clubs could be for you. Then don't be afraid to go about a degree strong. If you're really worried about the distance, just touch it. Just touch it a degree strong. You'd be surprised what a degree or two makes, right? We just showed you. So the 4 and the 5 come in what would be the hot metal forged product, which is the one in the middle. I just really wish they would have went there. Chris, if you're watching, the forged model, man. Please, the forged model. Anyway, let's go with that. Average to above average ball striker golfers, average to above average golfers that have above average ball striking capability. And don't be afraid to get the gap wedge. So hopefully you guys like what you saw. We're going to do some more because I have a few more irons to test, so stay tuned with that. And let's see your scores go low.